I've given quite a few talks on a similar topic before, but this one's actually the first time I've given sort of this particular flavor, so I'm really looking forward to it. So just a bit of background on me. I went to University of Canterbury way back in 2010, and so I'm a University of Canterbury alumni. I did civil engineering there, and then I worked on the Christchurch rebuild. And while I was working on the rebuild, I saw that the software that was being used at the time for managing documentation, document workflows, and signing workflows was pretty difficult to use and really inefficient. So I founded Lumin in 2014 to make a change to that. I also got a PhD in civil engineering and computer science at Stanford University. Graduated in 2020. And while I was at Stanford University, I was interested in using artificial intelligence for civil engineering purposes. Worked a lot with these robots, improving the way they navigate, using sort of human-like technology or human-like intelligence. And then the last few years, my work's been really focused on Lumin. I moved back to Christchurch 2 years ago to build out our Christchurch office for Lumin, where we do a lot of the managing operations and R&D. So for those of you who are not familiar with the product, this is a screenshot of sort of one of the pages of Lumin. And I've got like a quick video here just showing how the application works to give you a bit of a feel for what our software does. So Lumin started off as like a very simple PDF annotation tool, and now it's moving into being an entire document workflow management product. Where we see we can like highlight text, we'll be able to edit the PDF text soon, sign documents, and manage document workflows. But I won't bore you too much with the rest of the functionality there. I just wanted to give you a quick idea of what we're doing in Christchurch before we get into the rest of the talk. In terms of the company itself, we're moving into a new office pretty soon. We have 65 million people using the product around the world. And in 2021, we processed 1.5 billion document pages, which is enough to wrap the world 11 times. And our team is spread all around the world as well. So in terms of what I wanted to talk about today, I wanted to give a bit of insight into some of the trends I'm seeing in terms of web applications and what's changing in this machine intelligence, artificial intelligence world. And I wanted to take a bit of a spin on it, showing some of the parts that we may not see or the parts that are not so sexy on sort of a day-to-day, but that I think are really important for the New Zealand tech community to understand and familiarize themselves with. So I wanted to start by looking at sort of software in 2000, and at least my opinion, software in early 2000s was truly awful, like really terrible. The interfaces were highly complex. It would take people months or years to learn how to work software programs, and you felt like everything you did was manual. So if you wanted to achieve a goal, you were really pushing the boat through through a current working against you. It was tough going. And when we look at some of the products now, the likes of Uber, Airbnb, or just Google search, we find these things are natural to use. You can have a taxi arriving right outside your door within a few minutes and a few button clicks, or you can book a space in someone's house again within a few clicks of a button. And the products have actually become so easy to use that a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old, be it legal or not, can actually use these products. So something fundamentally has changed. And I think it's more than just the design and the interface. I think it's more than just the simplicity. I think, these products have actually evolved quite a lot from the sort of software we had in the 2000s. And my question to all of you would be, well, what has changed then? The simple answer: on one side, we've got a mobile device coming into play. We've got bigger buttons and less buttons, but what is the big change? What is the big change? So if we say take Netflix, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, but relatively simple interface, and we start to pull apart their interface, we see that when any two people log into Netflix, they see something totally different. This interface, whatever we see here on the screen, is totally customized for the person using the product. To the extent that I've gone through here and highlighted in green what has changed per person, and everything on the screen is fully customized. Up in the top right here, we do have the consistent elements. So we have the small search bar, which is really the place you can drive Netflix from. But for the most part, the rest of it is all dynamically generated on the fly. And we look at Google search, we see the same thing. So we see the same pattern with the search bar up the top left, where we can put user interface, we can put user input. But the rest of it is all generated for us. And if we take a look at Uber Eats, we see this pattern again coming through, where we have a steering wheel effectively up the top, where we can input some data, and the rest is all generated for us, right? To give us some options, but to kind of put the right answers in front of us. And if we look at the notifications on our phones, we see something similar where, we are seeing a prioritization of notifications. We're seeing certain notifications that we need to know about being provided for us, and the ones that are maybe not so interesting being held back. And so what I wanted to dive into here a little bit is how does this work? How do these machines, these big applications actually work? What's going on behind the scenes? And I'm obviously not going to be able to cover all of it, because there's millions of hours of R&D and billions of dollars going into these engines. But I wanted to at least give you sort of a high level understanding of what's going on, and dive into a few of the details to explain what might be happening here. So what we can do is, when we look at the way someone interacts with something like Netflix, we start with a person who wants to watch a show, for example. And that person at some stage is going to navigate to netflix.com, and we call that intent. So that means that they're interested in watching a show of some type. And then what's going to happen is the Netflix recommendation engine is going to generate some suggested content. And from that recommendation engine, we're going to populate sort of the full interface, everything the user sees. And so that part there, that Netflix recommendation engine, is what I'm going to call machine intelligence. That is some sort of an intelligence system that's taking the information about the user and sort of presenting that, or coming up with some recommendations. So that Netflix recommendation engine, that's going to use some artificial intelligence or some machine intelligence to answer this question. What show does this person want to watch? And it's going to take a whole lot of different information in to do that. So to give you a bit of an explanation on how a system like this might be built, or how it might work, I'm going to simplify it right down. I'm going to simplify the question right down to, okay, given two inputs, these could be two people, or in this case, we've just got two images. How do we answer a question about those images? And so in this question, I want to, just answer something a little more simple. Given these two images, one of a cat and one of a dog, how do we tell which is which? And so kind of a naive rule-based approach that people would use to do this sort of thing was, back in the 2000s or so, people would use these rule-based approaches where they would say, look, a cat has 2 eyes, a cat has pointy ears, a cat has yellow fur, a cat has whiskers. But what we found was, this never worked. And you could imagine the same for these recommendation engines. You could say, someone who's in New Zealand always wants to watch this type of show, or someone who's in Australia that has watched this type of show before likes to watch some other type of show. But the reality is these rule-based approaches don't really work because there's always exceptions. So in the case of classifying an image, we get these exceptions to the rule. All cats look different, and all of people's viewing history on videos is different as well. So in sort of the mid-2000s, the computer scientists were thinking about these problems. And what they came up with was this concept of training. And so in training, what we do is we take a whole lot of different examples. So on our left column here, we've got a whole lot of cat pictures, and we've got a column full of dog pictures, a column full of car pictures, and a column full of dinosaur pictures. And so we feed that into an algorithm, and we train that algorithm based on that input to try to predict what it's being fed, some information about what it's being fed. So we're going to go a little bit deeper here now. We're going to go one step a little more technical and see how this might look. So in terms of training one of these systems, what we actually want to do is we take that, that image, or in the case of someone's, video history, we actually take information about them and we encode that into a numerical form. And that's so the computer can understand it. And then we pass that numerical form through what we call a neural network, which is a large mathematical transformation. And that will give us an output. And we keep adjusting this mathematical transform, this neural network in the middle, so that it gives us exactly the output we want. We train it on examples per se. So we can give it some, examples of dogs. We pass that through that system and we get that output dog. And so there's a really cool visualization of how this actually works, which I'll show here. In this case, they're just training a system to recognize numbers using neural networks. And so what you see on the left side is the numbers going in. And then you see mathematical transformations being applied and the output number being predicted. So some really, really crazy things happened between around 2014 and 2020 using these systems. And we actually started to use these systems to start playing games, so these same neural network systems. And in 2014, they used one of these neural networks sort of to play this game here. And what it did after learning, it started to discover some really interesting strategies. And so you can see, like by 2014, these neural network systems had gone from being able to detect numbers or detect cats and dogs to being able to play pretty advanced games. around the same time, I was using these same sort of neural network systems to navigate robots. Just skip through that. And just before we get back to the user interface side, I just wanted to show you sort of as of 2020, how capable these kind of mathematical systems have become, these AI systems. So can anyone hear the volume on that one, or should I narrate it? I'm not quite sure. Cool, yeah.
No.
So in this game, we had artificial intelligent agents that were trying to play hide and seek. And so what we see is, some of these agents, they need to, so the aim of this game is that the red agents need to find the blue agents. The blue agents quickly learn that they can block the paths. And so, as these systems evolve and become more and more powerful, we see that the red agents actually get to the point where they can learn to jump into into this section. The blue agents learn to first take away the ramps so that the red agents can't get in. So if we then put the same sort of setup into a more open-ended environment, what we can see is these blue agents learn that they can actually build forts. And this was a really fascinating thing that came out, was the artificial intelligence that we have now is so advanced that in this case, the red agent has actually found an exploit in the physics simulation and being able to sort of overcome the rules of the game in order to win. And so I think the point I had here was that, these neural networks that we can use to predict have become so much more advanced. And this is the same, mathematics that's being used to generate recommendations. So if we go back to a kind of our recommendation problem that we had and put it all together. So if we then sort of go back to where we were on Netflix and pull it apart, and this is obviously an oversimplification, but I wanted to give you an idea about how this sort of system works. So what we have is we have our person wanting to watch a show. They navigate to something like Netflix. So now we load up our Netflix recommendation engine. What that's going to do is that's going to take all the information about that user. It's going to take various other patterns and various other data, and it's going to transform this again into a mathematical form. Here, I've shown a really simple mathematical form that might represent the user and the viewing history. In reality, that's going to be a much larger piece of mathematical information. That data is then going to be passed through a neural network, one of these sort of artificially intelligent mathematical functions that we've been talking about before, and that's going to generate our content for the interface. Now, one of my friends at Stanford that I work with quite closely, he actually took this one step further and he looked at, okay, instead of just generating the recommendations, can you actually generate the entire interface? And he did this piece of work about 4 years ago, where they were looking at generating everything we see on the screen using artificial intelligence. And I think as you sort of navigate through the internet today, you'll start to see that this pattern's becoming more and more common, where everything you look at and everything you do seems to be automatically generated in order to make sure that you have the best user experience possible. I think one really fascinating example of that, Airbnb just rolled out in 2021 their I'm flexible button, which pretty much allows you to just click a button and them to recommend where they think the best place for you to stay is, rather than you actually going through the choosing process. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's a fairly exciting concept. The last thing I wanted to point out was there are a lot of companies in New Zealand, this is as of 2018, that were exploring and using artificial intelligence. I think a lot of the time, these companies don't necessarily come right out and explain how they're using it. It's not always on the surface, but there's definitely a lot going on in this world. So I think it's really fascinating. I don't think we've added Lumin to that yet, but we'll make sure we make it on there. So finally, I wanted to just mention a few resources. This feels a bit salesy, but I don't work for any of these companies. But in terms of making some of this technology a bit more accessible to everyone, so Amazon actually released a product called Amazon Personalize, which allow you to leverage some of their artificial intelligence they use for product recommendations. You can leverage that for your own technology on a per usage basis. And then another big one, Algolia, they search APIs. They give you some of the sort of capabilities of Google search that you can integrate into your product. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Beautiful. Right, so if you've got any questions, please throw them into the chat. Otherwise, I'll kick off. Do you want to just stop your share, Max, and then
no problem.
See your face? And Max is also beaming in from the States, so hence why it's just turning to evening over there. So I guess first one, how is Lumin using AI? What paths are you taking that down?
Yeah, definitely. So what we do, we've sort of done a review of the other products in the space, and we find that in this document annotation world, there's not a lot of automation, and the sort of workflows are very difficult and very slow. So we're using a lot of data-driven investigation and analysis to try and inform us how best to build our product. And so what that means is giving the users, on different pages, giving certain groups of users certain experiences and other users other experiences, and constantly improving the product. We hope to roll in some more artificial intelligence into functionality like auto-completing forms. So if you've got a text form, we're working on how we can auto-complete that for you, so we can kind of get that form completed in seconds rather than days.
That sounds very exciting. And it's, I guess, how does a company the size of Lumin compete with the Netflixes and the worlds, I guess, as users start to expect that level of experience everywhere? How do you do that on a lower budget? Yeah, definitely. It's a fascinating question. And it is something that is really interesting, like you mentioned, the fact that users are expecting that everywhere. And that's becoming the norm. But what we find are there are, Lumin partners with a lot of companies. So there are a lot of companies out there that have realized that this technology is really, really helpful, and they've made that available. For example, Amazon with their personalized product, or we also partner with PDFtron, which is a sort of a big PDF multinational, which are doing artificial intelligence work as well. And so through our network of partnerships, through sort of open APIs and through our own R&D, we can actually present a product, which is combined sort of billions of dollars of research and development. While Lumin has a small team, I think the product itself, if you looked at all the components, would be, well over $1 billion of R&D has gone into it. Crazy. And so what parts of that's happening in Christchurch? Yeah, so what we're doing in Christchurch at the moment is we're just building our team. So our R&D team, we do analysis on sort of improving the way the user experience, a lot of that.
And that actually comes down to plotting out a lot of graphs, plotting out of trying to find where users are hitting difficulties, and fixing that. But we just moved into a new office, so we're looking at sort of hiring another 10 people in the next year. And they will be all working on, exploring how we can use artificial intelligence for autocomplete and for, detecting fraud and anything like that.
Cool. And so when you're talking about improving the user experience there, is that UI type people, or is that data?
A lot of data. A lot of data. We have a great, well-balanced team in Christchurch. So we do have some people, purely in design, some people in marketing, some people in customer success, but data is definitely a big area for us where we're growing out. So, these are going to be people that are interested in sort of machine learning and artificial intelligence and really pushing technology forward.
Cool. And where do you think, I guess, the big data gatherers, what's their next step in the AI world? How are they going to use the harvesters data either for or against us?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for us. I think we live in a world where the software is getting better and better, and things are getting easier and easier through software. The first example I can think of, which I think is really cool, is that Airbnb one about just choose me a place to stay. I don't know if that's any good, but I think the amount of insight they're getting now, they can kind of make really fun recommendations for people in terms of where they want to stay, or in the likes of an Uber, you could just get one and just go somewhere and just see where Uber's going to take you. So I think that's an interesting one. On the digital side, there's also a big movement in robotics, and so we will see definitely improvements in the robotics space. So fruit picking robots, autonomous cars, that sort of thing, is a huge push as well.
Cool. And I noticed, obviously, your team around the globe, you've got 5 in Ukraine. How have you been coping with the recent times over there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's been hugely disruptive for everyone around the world, really. What's going on in Ukraine, it's really sad. But our team have, for the most part, moved to safe locations outside of Ukraine. I think we just have one member of the team still in Ukraine, and is on the west side. So they've sort of moved out to safer space. But the office there was originally in Kiev, so it's been a tough time for that team. But I think all of them are safe at the moment, at present.
That's great to hear. And so just to round out, I guess, there is one question here. Is AI being applied to business ERP asset management software as the ultimate knowledge expert, or do you really need to start from scratch?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I can't think of an example where it has. I'm sure it has, but I just can't think of one there on ERP. But I think no one in the space needs to start from scratch. There's a huge amount of resources out there, and so it's more about connecting the dots. There's a lot of research that's been done. There's a lot of sort of open systems out there. So it will come down to a company being able to sort of identify any pain points in that ERP system and use or get started at least with some of the artificial intelligence that's freely available. I think matching those together could give a fairly good, fast result.
Cool. Right. And I guess one last thing in that, obviously, as you're looking to hire, you do a plug for what sort of skills you're after over the next year.
Definitely, we're growing rapidly in Christchurch and around the world. So we're interested in talking to anyone that likes the Lumin product and likes the Lumin vision. In Christchurch, we have a sort of a range of different people. We have sales, customer success, marketing, research and development, and engineering. So a range of different things. We'll be hiring across all of those roles But I think for me, it's more about finding someone that's really passionate about tech and about building that tech community in Christchurch.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, Max. It's been very enlightening. I especially loved those robots stealing the ramp. That was a genius move.
I think the technology that's out there right now is absolutely incredible. So yeah, definitely good to hear you enjoyed it.
Brilliant. And our next event on the 10th of May, move that, is with Marion Bittinker from Jade Software, and I think she will be talking around the warehouse group and what they've been doing with them. So thank you all for attending, and we will share the video after this.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye.